Now, more than ever, you need technology you can rely on.
頼れる人ですよね。
I'm a Dell Technologies advisor.
Ich auch.
我也是。
我aussi.
And if you're a small business, we're with you.
We are with you.
Estamos com você.
We want to help.
So we'll be right here.
At home, answering your calls, providing support,
And standing by you every step of the way.
Bye-bye.
Good morning. And so this is room A, and I hope you guys all enjoyed a great inspiring talk from the main stage. And we are ready to dig into cybersecurity. And the topic for today is remote threats, insider risk, and the remote work paradigm. And talking about it is Chris Jones, who is the Director of Cybersecurity for Dell Technologies. Chris is the Director of Cybersecurity for Dell, where he oversees e-discovery, digital forensics, cyber investigations, and insider risk operations. He has been involved in addressing insider threat problems for over 20 years within the US intelligence community, law enforcement, and large corporations. Chris founded the FBI's cyber profiling team and developed behavioral profiling and psychological analysis techniques for use in sensitive investigations. He is a multidisciplinary security convergence expert, having held leadership roles in risk management, complex investigations, cybersecurity, physical security, close protection, emergency management, and emergency medical services. A fun fact is, prior to Dell, Chris has also been an entrepreneur and has been part of 2 startups. So welcome, Chris. And let's get on with the session. There will be a Q&A at the end for the last 10 minutes. And please do post your questions. Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much.
One second, I'm sorry, Chris, not to interrupt you. I want to make an announcement to all the entrepreneurs and startups. Dell has what is called as a Grow Your Startup with Dell program. Silicon Valley has partnered up with Dell to give exclusive discounts to members on Dell products. Please do speak to a Dell Technologies representative one-on-one to learn about scalable technology solutions to make your startup grow. Please visit your session description and click on See More for the links to these exclusive discounts and schedule a one-on-one to learn more about scaling your technology. Thank you.
Thanks, Kumar. If I could get relinquished so I could share my screen out. This is an exciting time for us to get together, and what an interesting platform that we're all using to come together as entrepreneurs and business leaders to tackle new and emerging problems and new and emerging ways for us to overcome, adapt, and to provide value back to our communities and to our countries and to the world. So this is what a great time to be an entrepreneur. And I know it's kind of weird to say that, but I think for those of you that have this entrepreneur mindset, how can you not look at the problems in the world going on today and not see the opportunities that are there, the different things that are cropping up, the different roadways that are opening, the new needs that need to be met. It's such an interesting time for an entrepreneur mindset to be there, and there's just so many patterns and paths to go down to try to meet those needs and to help the world, help make it a better place, and to put your mark on how things are done and to how to move forward. So this is a great time for us to kind of transition and talk to one of my passions, which is an insider threat, insider risk problem within companies. This is probably one of the biggest threats that you'll face as an entrepreneur, is a problem from the inside. That's something I've experienced myself in my entrepreneurial days with people having unfettered access to information and doing things with those, taking client lists and customer base information and taking customers away from you and taking technology from you. So I think you should sit up, take notice, please ask questions. I don't know everything about this. I do know a lot. I've been doing this a long time. I may have seen a problem you're dealing with or have some comments about it. But that's a great way for us to kind of talk through this. I've got a presentation today to go through. And in that presentation, I'm going to give you 8 distinctive strategies that you can take back to your company, talk with your leadership about, and evaluate how are you dealing with potential insider threat and insider risk problem at your company today. So Dr. Larry Podimon, the chairman of the Podimon Institute, said that, in part of their research that they discovered that insider threats are not viewed as seriously as external threats. The external problems, the edge defenses and things like that, that's where the money gets spent today. Firewalls, keeping people out, keeping the good guys in, bad guys out. But when companies had an insider threat, in general, they're much more costly than an external incident. And this is largely due to the fact that the insider is smart. They've been in your company for a while, and they have the skills and knowledge to hide their crimes for months and years and sometimes forever. So, and that's something to think about, is you have to not only consider the external threats to your company, but as your company grows, the internal threats, as you start to build your teams out and it gets bigger and bigger, it's very important to start putting controls and a security mindset in place and bake that into the culture of how your company operates to protect your intellectual property and how you're doing business. What is your secret sauce? One of the things we need to do quickly is just talk about what is an insider threat. Let's just baseline what that is right off the bat. An insider threat is a person who is a trusted team member, past or present, who is an employee or a contractor or has some form of legitimate access to your systems and facilities, and because of some stressor or event in their life, or some motivation, they perform some action that causes damage or compromises valuable information. There are 3 basic types of insider threats. The first one is the malicious insider, who aim to take advantage of their access to inflict harm on an organization. Number 2 are the negligent insiders. These are the people who make errors and disregard policies and put their organizations at risk. This is probably the most prevalent type of an insider that you'll find at any company, and certainly been the case in my current and past organizations, where most of the time the problem is people who are negligent. There's training issues, they're not following policies, they're not malicious in what they're doing. The third type are infiltrators, who specifically come to your company and they obtain legitimate access credentials without authorization. This is stealing domain credentials, or even coming in and getting a job at your company with the specific purpose of getting access to the information. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So let's talk about the main stressors and triggers that people deal with in dealing with how they transform into a threat to your organization. The first one is unmet expectations. And these are some of the basic ones that are out there. So unmet expectations is somebody that has an expectation. They've been working hard at your company. They've been doing all these great, cool things, putting a lot of work hours in, and they have expectations of getting some type of financial reward, a position, or being moved to a project that they want to, but that doesn't happen for some reason. So they have unmet expectations stemming from that. Number 2, they can bring personal predispositions and bias to your organization. And that means that somebody that's coming in, and we all have these things where they have knowledge, experience, background, some worldview that may not align with what your organization's goals are, and it can cause them to make decisions and do things that can compromise the value of your organization. The next one is someone who has an entitlement mentality. And this is someone who's coming in that feels like they're the best of the best, the uber rock star of the world, and that you should just be giving them whatever it is they ask for without question, that they're entitled to everything that they get, and whatever they take is theirs because they deserve it. The fourth one is substance abuse. This is a difficult one because it will often cause good people with good hearts, good intentions, to do things that they wouldn't normally do. when they're under the influence of some drug, alcohol, or some substance. It's causing them problems, and it changes the way that they think. It compromises their integrity, and it causes problems for you at the end. And last is one of the oldest ones in the book is money issues. And with money issues, we look for three things. It's called the fraud triangle. And the fraud triangle consists of three baselines. The first one is pressure, meaning that there's some pressure on their life, whether it's some type of healthcare issue, some type of money issue, their house is being foreclosed on, they have medical bills coming in, their car is about to be repossessed. So there's some pressure that exists on them financially to do something. The next one is, do they have opportunity? We know they've got pressure. Everybody has pressure on them. But next, we're looking for opportunity. And this could be in the form of a corporate credit card, access to your checking accounts or other financial instruments and institutions, ability to transfer money around, ability to do accounts payable and set up new vendors for your company. And the next one is the rationalization. This is when they cross the line to say, you know what, I need this money. The company, I'm just going to borrow this. The company wouldn't want my car to get repossessed. They want me to show up to work. They wouldn't want that to happen. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this, and take care of that problem, or take care of that money issue, that healthcare issue that I have, and move forward with it. So those are some of the basic triggers that we look for. Now, next up is the motivations. So these are the base motivations that profilers work through. We call them the behavioral motivational typologies, and these are the baseline motivations that we look at in the behavioral analysis world to see what is someone doing, what is their motivation, and it helps us kind of put them into categories of how to deal with them in some way. I'm just going to briefly go through these with you so you have an understanding of what they are. First one is the power reassurance or the compensatory person. Someone who is operating from a motivational baseline of power reassurance or compensatory, they're trying to do things to restore their self-confidence through low aggressive means. And this means sometimes they're trying to reassure their victims, show concern for their victims, and they oftentimes will need emotional support back for them, like, am I treating you well? Am I doing good things? Am I hurting you in some way? I don't want you to be hurt. But they're trying to build their self-confidence up by trying to take control, but it's through low aggressive, nonviolent means generally. And that's kind of hallmarked by the reassurance and trying to show concern for their victims. Next one is the power assertive. This is the person who is trying to restore self-confidence or self-worth through moderate to highly aggressive means. Their driving motivation for power is characterized by power and dominance. They're trying to get that self-worth back through being assertive and being entitled to that power. Next one is going to be the anger retaliatory, or the displaced anger. These are actions that indicate a great deal of rage toward a specific group, institution, or a symbol. They will often place the blame on the victim for what they're doing. So this is somebody who is raging against their organization. They're blaming them for what's happening. Like, this is your fault that this is happening. I didn't want to do this, but you pushed me to this. The last one is sadistic anger and anger excitation. And this is somebody who is specifically taking these actions against their victim for the sheer pleasure of inflicting pain and suffering. They're not looking to be retaliatory. They're doing it just for the fun of it because it's their gratification. There is a fifth one, the profit material gain, as we talked about earlier, with the financial motivations, the fraud triangle, those kind of things. These are actions that are driven for material or personal gain for some reason. Now, what does this mean to you? And throughout the government and most large corporations, they're spending millions of dollars on analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence tools to mine all this vast quantity of data that's out there. And they're looking for indications of theft, sabotage, workplace violence, and trying to get out in front of people and see what are the indicators of people who commit these crimes Can we see that on their technology systems prior to them committing a crime or doing something wrong? But chances are you may not have that type of a budget and a security team to put against that. But that's okay. You have something that the large companies don't have, and that's a smaller span and layer of control over your employees. The reason that this is important is despite all the technology spend and all the data mining, the predictive analytics that everybody talks about, these systems still can't replace the value of relationships and knowing your employees. Maybe you're just starting to get big enough to not know everybody, and that's okay. It doesn't change the above. Maybe you work at a company the size of Dell, and we have 170,000 plus employees. Well, that's okay. It doesn't change the fact that the relationships are still important. It just says that all of the tech helps you get out in front of a problem before it becomes problematic. As we've seen, there's nothing replaces the value of empowering your employees and your HR team and the management team to look for indicators, to notice something that isn't right, for behavior that doesn't make sense, and comments that are concerning, something odd, it just doesn't feel right, and they just feel like something is going on with this employee. The most important and best early indicator of potential problems already work for you, the managers and the employees. Chances are they've got someone that they're feeling uncomfortable about if they're seeing these behaviors going on. We'll talk specifically about some of those in a moment. You just have to train and empower them to follow up appropriately when concerns are raised. In a one-on-one in-person relationship, you're likely to have a better opportunity to get out in front of a problem before it occurs. And if your HR team isn't properly prepared and your leadership team isn't properly prepared to address these issues, these can quickly turn into big problems that you really don't want to be dealing with. So treating people like human beings, listening to them when you're aware that an employee has a problem, they're exhibiting behaviors and someone feels strange enough about it to bring it up to management, it's time to sit down with that person and talk to them and listen and think about what they're saying and be compassionate and show compassion to them. And it's okay for them to express emotion and listen to what they're saying and try to find a way to help them in some way. You need to seriously look at how the situation impacts your company also. And if you come to a point where you need to exit that employee, you need to have a plan for that also. What if your employee is a high performer? This is the age-old question. You've got a high performer that's generating a lot of revenue or a lot of good ideas or a lot of technology infrastructure pieces that you need, but are they toxic to your team? They may be causing a bigger problem in the long run than the value that they're bringing now. It's time to think about how are you dealing with them? Are you coaching them on this behavior? Are you directly confronting them about it? And are they working to change with you? Because a toxic employee can, in the long run, really cause more damage to the company than the value that they're bringing to the table. So let's talk quickly about the indicators. Now, any one of these on their own are not necessarily a concern. You've got declining work performance, declining hygiene, like people come in very disheveled, they're not showering or bathing, their clothes look like they haven't been washed in a while. Sometimes they may mention interviewing with competitors. There can be indications of money problems. You may be overhearing phone calls of collection agents trying to call them, and you hear them becoming very agitated on the phone with those people. The flip can be true also with sudden affluence, where someone who doesn't make a lot of money as a relatively low-paid employee in your company suddenly starts showing up in a new car or is living in an area town, and it happens quickly, and there's no other known reason for that to happen. And even unapproved and unexplained changes in work behavior. Any one of these on their own are not necessarily a problem. It's just when they start to all come together at once, it's when it becomes what we call the cloud of indications. So we look for a lot of these things across the board, and we look for this through technology, and we look for it also through training our managers and our leaders to look for these things. Open hostility toward leadership. Are they accessing USB and external storage and transferring a large amount of data to it? Do you have protections in place to monitor for that? technology systems are suddenly acting weird and then sometimes suddenly fixed with no apparent even call to have it fixed. It's like it just self-resolves. Being passed over for promotion, becoming possessive and non-communicative with their coworkers, emotional outbursts, and talking about resigning. These are all just clouds of indications where any one on their own is not a problem. Maybe any three on their own is not a problem. Maybe all of them together is still not a problem. But it takes someone to sit down with compassion and empathy, but also with purpose in mind, who's trained to have these discussions with employees to find out what's going on in their life. Can we help? Is there something we can do? You'll build a lot of goodwill by looking like you're interested in your employees' well-being and keeping them gainfully employed and a productive member of your organization. So sit down and talk with them about these. It may not be a problem, or it may be that other things have already taken place that you need to take care of. Now, the problem that we're dealing with now as a whole is the mass shift to remote working. At Dell, we transferred over 90% of our workforce to a complete remote model over the course of about 8 weeks. So that's like 170,000 employees that transitioned over. We were prepared and had somewhat of the infrastructure and capacity in place. Many companies did not. And that's a big lift and a big ask to transfer your workforce to a remote stance. And in the study that was published in 2019, about 3.6% of Americans worked at home full time prior to 2019. And now we're still at very high, 80 to 90% of the workforce is still working remotely. And that looks like it's going to continue for some time, even when things are starting to release. Many companies are evaluating, do we need to bring people back into the office? Maybe we should just stay remote. There's changes everywhere, and this remote stance brings a lot of new internal risk and changes, like your VPN volumes for people that are remote and they're having to come back in to do work. Can your infrastructure handle this increase? What about the change in levels of user permission? The zero trust and least privilege models are not as easily applied due to remote work, but these are important things that you have to look at and evaluate. How are your teams accessing the information that they need to do their job? There's a higher likelihood of data exfiltration. They don't have the same tools and the same workspace setup that they had in the office, so it's likely they could be taking shortcuts to manipulate and handle data that can cause a higher likelihood of data exfiltration and loss of control of that intellectual property. And people working at home are going to naturally have employment uncertainty. Who wouldn't in this time? You're looking around at what's going on in the world, and it's hard to know what's the longevity of my position. So people can start to do things to hoard information that's important to them that they think may help them in their next position. It may not be a malicious intent behind it, but they're still taking your intellectual property and proprietary information to do that. You've got modified schedules of people working all kinds of different hours now. And you need cloud services, SaaS and platform services. And you've got to have an HR team that's adapting to these things, such as training, doing workforce training on how to handle, what are your expectations and your policies about working remote? How are you doing hiring? And even as important, how are you doing terminations remotely? It can be done and it can be done effectively, but these are things you have to think about in advance so that they don't become a problem in the long run. Risk of credential intercepts due to higher volume of logins outside the office. There's a higher frequency in phishing attempts. I think everybody's seeing that across multiple different platforms. Greater chance of data commingling from your home and your personal machines to your work systems. So there's a lot of opportunities in general for more cyber attacks that are going on. To mitigate these threats, one of the best things to do is to train your employees. I'll give you a resource to a great low and no cost training facility here in just a moment. Utilizing endpoint insights if available. What are you collecting? Are you collecting logs from your endpoints? Are you looking at your SIM data? What's going on there? Are you actually going, and is anyone actually looking at it? A lot of people collect all this data, but no one ever looks at it. Are you leveraging predictive analysis whenever and wherever possible? This gets into the higher level of security, and it's a lot more costly to do so, but you may be able to do that with some of the information you have already. Constantly assess and increment your SOPs, policies that you have. You should always be doing multi-factor authentication on cloud services. Do third-party evaluations of your existing security infrastructure. We've talked about human resource policies and making sure they're up to date and follow closely the hire and termination events. One of the last ones, an interesting one that we've done at the organizations I've been associated with, is randomized active testing of employees. So you can do phishing emails, you can do other things, and there are third-party companies that can do these for you, even at a small scale if you're a smaller company. And these kind of randomized testing of controlled phishing attempts against your employees can help identify those people who may be vulnerable to those types of attack. And you can target additional training for those folks before anything happens to make sure they've got better tools and they're better equipped and skilled at identifying these issues when they happen. So here's some key takeaways. These are the 8 things that you need to know that you should be thinking about as a leader in your company to protect against these insider risks. Number 1, this is probably the most important thing. Know who you're hiring. Perform background checks, criminal checks, credit checks, professional license checks, and validate their skills. This is for someone that you know also. You may know them personally, you may have known them for years, but you should perform the same check on them as you do for everyone else. You may be surprised at what shows up that you were not aware of that happened in their life. A background check, are you validating their resume? Did you perform a criminal history check on them? A credit check. It's important to note that a poor return on a credit check or a criminal history is not a barrier to employment at your company. But were they candid with you in the process of coming on board? Did they falsify information? And also, if they've got convictions, for example, for some type of fraud activity, do you want them to be in a position to handle money within your company? It may alter some of the positions or things that you want them to do. Not a barrier to entry at all. But were they being upfront and honest with you coming in? Candor is a big thing within our world to make sure someone's being upfront with you and honest about who they are and what they're coming in at. If you require a professional license, you should validate that with the organization that carries that license. Then validate skills. There's many ways to check this, and I can't tell you the number of times I performed interviews on people, and I'm quite sure that the person that I interviewed on the phone who performed skills tests were not the same person that showed up for in-person interviews. So I highly recommend that you validate the skills through skill testing. Number 2, bake a security culture into your company. Be explicit and serious about it. Document handling procedures for how to handle your crown jewel information. And most importantly, follow them yourself. You've got to be the champion for this if you want security to be baked in as a culture. You set the standard. You set the way everyone else is going to walk. And if you're seen as someone who violates and flouts the rules constantly, no one else is going to do it also. So you've got to be as serious about it and expect the same thing from them. Number 3, know and protect your crown jewels. This is also a very, very important piece of it. You've got to mark them, restrict access. This is very important because in a court situation, if these things are not marked, the courts can come back and say, you did not provide security controls around them, and these items were not marked properly. Therefore, we don't think that they were proprietary information, proprietary technology. So that's something that you've got to really work on. Know what your crown jewels are. What is the secret sauce? And protect them. Let people be human. Number 4, it's okay to have and express emotion and frustration and engage and help where possible. Number 5, no one should ever be the only person who knows this, the only person who can do that, the only person who has this password. No one should ever be the linchpin for any problem that comes in. If they're the only person that can make that decision, you're in a bad place. Back up your data and test your backup plan regularly. back up your data and test your backup. Make sure your technology team has a plan and test your recovery plan. Number 7, go back to your board and your leadership and manage your risk by asking what if questions. What if this happened? What if that happened? This is a risk assessment process, and come out with what are the top viable risks that you as a company face, and then come up with a written plan to address those. It's not going to cover all the bases, but at least you'll have something to work from of the top viable risks. Is it a natural disaster? Is it a flood? Is it an earthquake? Or is it power outage or a machine breakdown or some other issue? Manage those risks by thinking about them and have a plan to address them. And then last, empower someone to lead protection. Someone needs to own it. You have a board for a reason. Have them validate your approach. They bring a lot of information to the table. Listen to what they have to say. And also remember, you may have insurance or regulatory requirements that you need to work with. So with that, I promise you a low-cost access to some cybersecurity education pieces, and that's through the NIST.gov website, NIST.gov. If you look for NICE, N-I-C-E, the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, they have a page there that has a listing of a lot of low to no cost educational opportunities for employees, for people within technology and even the security realm. I highly recommend this as a resource for you to go check out. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and I think you'll find a lot of value there. There's 2 other books here on the screen that you can take a look at that should help you learn more about insider threat and to help you develop a plan. The first one is Insider Threat Program, your 90-day plan by Sean Thompson. The second one is the CERT Insider Guide to Insider Threats, published by Carnegie Mellon CERT. And this is a great guide that will give you all the case studies and reviews of past cybersecurity and insider risk cases that'll help you develop your plan to move forward. And with that, I think we have some time for questions.
Yes, Chris. Thank you very much for a very inspiring talk on and the do's and don'ts of cybersecurity. We have a lot of questions here, and let me just get back to the first one. Okay, the first question is, please share your thoughts to make remote work super successful.
So first off, I think having a good steady internet connection at the remote location, typically the people's homes, is probably number one. You've got to have access that's stable to be able to transfer potentially large amounts of information. That's a problem that everybody faces. Not everyone has good, stable internet connections. From there, you really need to start looking at how you're doing access control. Are you doing role-based access control or some other schema, potentially coming from a zero trust model, where you're only giving access to the information the person needs to do their job rather than having it all open for everyone. You really need to sit back and stop the whole corporate shares that used to be ubiquitous years ago, and narrow that down to when people are working on specific projects, only have that project data available to the people on that team. So access control is huge, in addition to having a good solid network connection.
That's great. The next question is, what are the tools to be used which are reasonable and efficient for work from home, especially for small businesses?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, if you're talking about doing security monitoring and things like that, you really need to go back to your servers and go back to your logs that you're collecting. You probably have some sense of a security event aggregator that's taking the logs from your servers and those accesses. And there's a few things that you can look for. You can start collecting specifically the dates and times people are accessing different resources, And if you own the endpoints that people are coming in from, meaning the laptops or the desktops, you can start collecting other logs from those endpoints, such as USB logs, to see how much information is being transferred, what external devices are being plugged in and utilized, and even some print functions. And just start watching those things over time and looking for something that's not like the other, something that stands out, some anomaly. So you've likely already have a lot of the logging information you need. You just need a good way to just pick the nuggets out. And those are some of the main that we look for: velocity of file transfers, and are they accessing information that's outside the time span that they're supposed to be working or normally work, and are they accessing or trying to access information that's not a part of their job.
Thanks, Chris. I think we just have time for one last question, and that's: is there any AI-based tools available based on your stressors trigger slide to identify insider threat before it affects an organization?
Yeah, there are a number of those tools called the UEBA, User Behavior Analytics tools, that basically reside on top of your security event aggregator. There are a number of those out there. Those are pretty ubiquitous and easy to find. I can name a few, such as Exabeam, Securonix, ForcePoint. There's a number of companies out there that offer these types of layered approaches to put on top of information you already have to help you kind of work through the AI piece of it. It's still not as elegant as you might think it is, but it's starting to get better as there's more and more investment into the UEBA space.
Okay, I think that that'll end this session. Thank you very much, Chris, for a great talk on this cybersecurity and all the threats. And we hope to see you again. And thank you very much for your time and participation.